it's not something that would be advertised by a large cybersecurity firm because the companies are quite open about the fact that this is occurring.
Okay. But at the risk of sounding paranoid, we think back to Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, and I think you've said a version of this yourself. If you told everybody you were doing it, if you let the information out into the wild, you would lose exclusive and precious access to it because you're sitting on a bit of a goldmine.
You are, and so you certainly not want to let any of those details out. So no company in their right mind, whether it's Facebook, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, are going to say, here is a list of customers and what they're interested in. What they're going to do instead is say, why don't you give me some money and tell me what you want to sell and who you want to sell it to, and we'll make sure those ads get in front of them.
Suddenly, Siri sometimes pipes up. You know, even when you haven't said, hey, Siri, because you've obviously said something that triggered Siri.
Yes.
So presumably there might, and we're not saying there are, but there might be triggers like, I'm thinking of such and such, and that wakes up the cloud recorder. Is that kind of how it would happen if it's going on, Peter?
That is possible. The way those things work is they're listening constantly in the background, but they don't send anything out to the remote companies unless certain patents are met. So they use a process called feature extraction. So they listen to the audio waves and then use a computer algorithm to extract certain parts of it to estimate whether or not that sounds like OK Google, Hey Siri, any of these sorts of things, and then at that point start recording. Now, because of the way feature extraction works, it's very difficult to determine from reverse engineering or analysis what those trigger phrases might be, because there's nothing in the computer code which says we're looking for Hey Siri. It's saying we're looking for these different possibility sequences of numbers which are derived from the audio which they're receiving all the time. So there may very well be a lot of additional trigger phrases that are not documented.
Interesting to talk to you, and thank you, Peter. That's Dr. Peter Hannay from Perth talking about these possibilities. So the reporter for Vice, twice a day for 5 days, used phrases that could be used as triggers. And I think one of them was, I'm thinking about going back to uni. And she reckons she was suddenly being told about courses at various universities. I suppose it can be confirmational bias, but it seems spooky.
It's very spooky. Has it happened to you, James? I've actually been mentioning something, and then suddenly I'll be thinking about learning French, for instance. Suddenly Duolingo, the
bonjour.
app, well, bonjour, will pop up, and suddenly I'm sort of being bombarded with language apps and things.
Mate, I think
weird.
You might be a genius. I think you've cracked it because you know how on your phone it's always language specific to the country you're in. Maybe in New Zealand, it's only recording in English. So if we just all, listen up, panel experts, if we just all learn te reo, we're going to be safe as houses.
Brilliant idea.
Also, in a little serendipitous movement today, I did buy the book How to Break Up With Your Phone by Catherine Price. I think we should all be doing this.
Is that a local book or is it...
It's a book that I bought from the Women's Bookshop. It's a fabulous book about how to stop the addiction with your phone.
Okay, that sounds intriguing. What's it called? How to Break Up With Your Phone?
How to Break Up With Your Phone.
Okay. Presents for teenagers all over New Zealand.
Yeah, exactly.
Janet Wilson, lovely to have you on the panel today.
Pleasure.
Nice to see you. And James Nakise, good luck with those shows, James.
Yes, good luck, James.
Whawhatai, and thank you for coming on. That's us. Have a lovely weekend, everybody, if you've got it off, or even if you haven't. We're back on Monday, and Checkpoint is coming right up.
Kia ora, good evening and welcome to Checkpoint. I'm Rowan Quinn, in tonight for John Campbell. On the programme tonight, a man who fatally stabbed his father has been found not guilty of murder. The government announces a new standalone ministry to tackle the housing crisis. After 3 decades, Auckland's Western Springs Speedway makes way for cricket. More than 500 farmers turn up to a Mycoplasma bovis meeting in Morrinsville. A Christchurch woman posts an open letter to EQC about her 5 years of anguish, heartbreak and financial struggles after purchasing a home with botched repairs. And we hear from the proud nana of Scott, Geordie and Bowden Barrett about how she'll be filling her scrapbook ahead of tomorrow's test.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The Auckland man accused of murdering his father wept as not guilty verdicts were handed down in the High Court this afternoon. He then had to leave court after hugging his partner and child. Justice Duffy told the jurors she had not experienced the level of emotion that had been on display in this trial. The court heard that the father subjected the family to years of violence. On the day he died, the father had beaten his wife. Later that night, he was locked out of the house, kicking at the door and trying to put his hand in the windows. The family believed he had left the property and the son went to investigate, taking a knife. But a scuffle broke out, during which the father was fatally stabbed. The son's lawyers argued he had acted in self-defence. The Salvation Army says a decision to set up a new ministry to deal with the housing crisis is a step in the right direction. The Ministry of Housing and Urban Development will incorporate units currently spread across the 3 departments into a one-stop policy shop on affordable housing, homelessness and large-scale housing developments. A social policy analyst with the Salvation Army, Alan Johnston, says ramping up efforts to house the homeless should be the top priority for the new organisation.
Our view is that we address the homelessness issue first. The Kiwi Build thing is an important medium-term response that we need to make, but we just need to get on with building state houses and other forms of social housing because that's where the biggest need is.
Alan Johnston. The new ministry will start operating from August. Some commuters in Auckland will have to find another way home tonight after a truck took out overhead train lines. Train services on the Western Line from Newmarket to Swanson have been suspended until further notice. Sarah Robson has more.
The police say a truck took out train lines at a level crossing in Mount Eden near the prison around 2 o'clock this afternoon. Train services have been suspended until further notice. Part of the road was also closed as the lines were cleared. Auckland Transport says the overhead lines are being repaired, but they will take several hours to fix. People who usually take the train are being told to make alternative plans to get home. There will be some limited rail replacement buses. Ko Sarah Robson, Aho.
A neighbour to Auckland's Western Springs Speedway says he'd rather have a racing than cricket next door. After 90 years of racing, the Speedway and the Auckland Council have agreed that the sport will move to another venue in Wiri, near the Auckland Airport. The Speedway has only been allowed 12 days of racing a year after neighbours complained about the noise. The council is considering turning the space into an international cricket venue. Nigel Gray, whose property backs onto the track, says a lot of nearby locals are in favour of the Speedway and is sad to see it go.
I'd have Speedway every day over cricket. I'm not against cricket. I've just seen, and we all have seen, the impact of cricket at Eden Park and the residents with road closures, parking restrictions, the volume of people, the noise. Look, you know, we're just going to move one problem to another area.
Nigel Gray says concerts and other big events held there have a greater effect on the community. Dunedin Hospital's new gastroenterology department is expected to help a region with one of the highest bowel cancer mortality rates in New Zealand. The Lower South Island-based unit officially opened this afternoon. The department's clinical director, Jason Hill, says the facility will increase the number of colonoscopies performed each year.
He went to hospital basically because he had pain in his knees and legs, so the tumour must have been sort of pressing on his nerve. I mean, none of us knew, so it was a big shock basically.
A decision to temporarily suspend the search for survivors after the eruption of Guatemala's Fuego volcano has dashed the hopes of finding anyone else alive. The search has been halted because the conditions for rescue workers are too dangerous. The death toll from the eruption now stands at 109, but it's expected to rise because up to 200 people are still missing. Ana Maria Mendez from Oxfam says it's a desperate situation for the families of those still believed trapped beneath the ash and debris.
There's a huge amount of fear, knowing that the event has not stopped, and also recognizing that the amount of damage that has been caused and the magnitude of this tragedy has been very hard on people.
Oxfam Guatemala's Ana Maria Mendez. Emergency authorities say rescue efforts will resume if conditions on the ground improve. It's coming up to 5 past 5. Sport, the former Solicitor General Michael Heron will conduct the independent review of both High Performance Sport New Zealand and New Zealand Cycling after the controversial departure of head sprint coach Anthony Peden. Peden stepped down after reported allegations of bullying, an inappropriate relationship with an athlete and drinking issues last week. High Performance Sport NZ Chief Executive Michael Scott says Heron's credentials are the best fit for this review.
He's an investigator, he's a QC, he's conducted many such reviews in government, in the corporate sector. He's undertaken a review of the All Blacks back in 2007, so his skills and experience, I believe, making him an ideal candidate to undertake this important review.
Michael Scott. The Blackburn Sevens have a difficult task if they're to lift their 5th World Series title, sitting 4 points behind Australia ahead of this weekend's final in Paris. Australia won the first 2 tournaments, then finished 3rd and 2nd in the next 2, which New Zealand won. They face England in Game 1 at midnight. The Geraldine driver Hayden Paddon will be looking to make amends for what he describes as being robbed in their last WRC outing. Paddon lines up for this weekend's rally of Sardinia, a fortnight after crashing out in Portugal, which put him in hospital for a night. It's the 5th time Paddon will compete in Sardinia, where he's achieved his first podium 3 years ago. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, country life is knee-deep in nitrate-contaminated water in Canterbury. It looks like a good lager, but you wouldn't want to drink it. We're off to the Trom, which is looking forward to a bit of vinyl action this weekend. And because we banned them on this day in 1987, we have a Sonic Tonic dedicated to nukes. That's N-U-K-E-S, pronounced.
And unlike Brian, I can't tell you exactly what we're up to because it's an ever-changing landscape as we head towards 10 p.m. I do know we'll wrap up the day's news in the long bulletin at 10, and I'll be talking to newsmakers from around the country with an eye on international events from the foreign desk. That's Lately with Karen Hay, live between 10 and 11 weeknights on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Whanganui and Taihape, also Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Taupō. Mostly fine, the odd shower about eastern Northland tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, showers easing today and clearing Hawke's Bay later, fine tomorrow. Manawatu and Kapiti, fine today, partly cloudy tomorrow with isolated showers. Wellington and Wairarapa, cloud and showers gradually clearing today, then mainly fine, brief showers about Wellington tomorrow morning. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and North Otago, generally fine but increasing high cloud tomorrow. For the remainder of Otago and Southland, fine today apart from inland valley fog or low cloud, high cloud tomorrow and scattered rain spreading north from afternoon. Bulla and Westland, fine at first but cloud increasing this evening, scattered showers tomorrow and rain with heavy falls developing in Westland from afternoon. For Fiordland, showers developing this evening, rain with heavy falls tomorrow, easing from evening, and the Chatham Islands cloudy periods with a few showers today. It's 8 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. And tonight, a super housing ministry, a super proud Barrett grandmother and a weary EQC claimant. But first, in the last hour, we have a verdict in a high-profile Auckland murder trial, and it's not guilty. The father had a string of convictions to his name and he'd spent time in prison, and when he got out, he'd regularly beat his wife and children. In contrast, his son shunned his father's lifestyle, held down a regular job, loved his family, and had never been in trouble with the police. All that changed one night last year when his father came charging out of the dark and punched him in the face. A jury at the High Court in Auckland has just found the son not guilty of murdering his father after he stabbed him 6 times. His lawyers said he'd acted in self-defence. Well, Edward Gay's been covering the trial and joins me now in the studio. Edward, what was the reaction like there?
Well, as soon as these verdicts came down, as soon as the foreman read out those verdicts, the son wept as the not guilty verdict to murder and then manslaughter were read out. After Justice Duffy told him he could leave the dock, he went straight into the public gallery. Many members of his family were there to watch those verdicts come down this afternoon. He immediately went to his partner, hugged her, hugged his baby, and Justice Duffy told the jurors actually shortly afterwards, he actually had to leave the courtroom, he was overcome with emotion, and Justice Duffy told the jurors that she had never presided over a trial with so much emotion.
And so, can you tell us a little bit about the background to the case? Earlier, before the stabbing, earlier in the day, the father had assaulted his wife, and that was the defendant's mother.
Yeah, that's right. And the wife told the court at trial that she had, this sort of all started, she found text messages on her husband's phone from another woman, and the pair had an argument over this. During that argument, the wife told her husband that the woman was ugly, and he responded by telling her that he'd make her look ugly. He then punched her, kicked her while she was on the ground, and she eventually managed to get out of the house, taking their young baby with her in the pram, and she made this half-hour walk around to the son and daughter's home in this condition, blood all over her face.
And that's when the father, the man who was killed, followed her.
That's right. He actually visited his son and daughter's house 3 times on this night. The first occasion, he actually assaulted one of his younger sons, accusing him of stealing coins out of his car. And on the third, though, this was when the fatal stabbing took place. The third time he came round, the family had actually locked him out of the house. They closed all the doors, deadlocked the front door. But that didn't stop the father from roaming around the house, trying to put his hand in the windows, kicking on the front door. He was yelling threats, including that he would smash up his son's car that was parked outside, that his son needed for work so badly. At one stage, the son told police in his interview that he actually picked up a knife at the stage because he was fearful that his dad would actually come through the door, and he didn't know what his dad would have in his hand. But eventually the family threw out a pair of car keys to the daughter's car, and the family, or various members of the family, actually saw the father go down the driveway. They thought he had gone. And it was at this point that the son says he felt he needed to go out and check that his car was okay. He went outside and he found out at that point that his father hadn't gone. His father had actually come back onto the property. He was waiting on the deck, and he described being rushed, if you like, and punched in the face. He later told police in this DVD interview that was played in court that he had no opportunity to run away. Everything happened so fast. He said his father already had him. And in her summing up today, Justice Duffy actually told the jurors to think about whether the son was taken by surprise, how dark it was outside. It was pitch black, officers first on the scene said. Who was the aggressor, what opportunity the son had to actually stop and assess the situation and maybe do something different. She also told them that they could take the family's experience of domestic violence, some 20 years of violence, into account, as that showed what fears the son had and what the son knew his father was capable of.
And the jury obviously accepting that self-defence case. So look, thank you so much for that, Edward Gay, reporting to us there on the high-profile murder trial, which a not guilty verdict has just been delivered. A new standalone ministry tasked with fixing the housing crisis will be up and running in a couple of months. The Ministry of Housing and Urban Development will roll units that are spread across 3 departments into a one-stop policy shop in charge of affordable housing, homelessness and large-scale developments. The housing sector's backing the move, though they warn there's still a lot to do to make sure more houses can be built faster for those in need. Our economics correspondent Patrick O'Mara reports.
The Housing Minister Phil Twyford is in no doubt his new ministry can make a difference.
It's only a small part of it, but it will deliver a better result.
This will help fix the housing crisis.
It certainly will help us to fix the housing crisis.
The new organisation will be cobbled together from housing units in the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, Ministry of Social Development and Treasury, and will officially start operating in October. It will cost $8 million in the first year. Salvation Army social policy analyst Alan Johnson says a dedicated housing ministry that speaks with one voice is a step in the right direction.
Look, I don't think any of those ministries have done housing well, and they've always had a patch to look after, and probably never really been able to think about the integrated whole.
National's housing spokesperson Judith Collins disagrees, saying the new ministry is a waste of time.
A new office, a new logo, and shifting the desks for the officials has never actually built a house in the past, and I don't think it's going to do anything now.
Judith Collins says the country's housing woes are well known and reforms to the Resource Management Act are needed to make it easier and quicker to build homes. Industry representatives such as the Registered Master Builders have some sympathy with that point of view. While its chief executive, David Kelly, believes a cohesive policy approach will help, he says the new ministry must address crucial issues such as council planning and consents, as well as the infrastructure for new subdivisions.
Housing doesn't sit on its own, and it needs to be connected to those other broader issues related to the Resource Management Act, related to the need for infrastructure and how local government works.
Sorting out the ministry's priorities may require some diplomacy. The Salvation Army's Alan Johnston says dealing with homelessness should be at the top of the ministry's to-do list, rather than the government's Kiwi Build plan to build 100,000 houses over the next decade.
Our view is that we address the homelessness issue first. The Kiwi Build thing is an important medium-term response that we need to make, but we just need to get on with building state houses and other forms of social housing because that's where the biggest need is.
A housing strategist, Leonie Freeman, says it's crucial the new ministry also provides a detailed plan to show how policy decisions will translate into large-scale housing developments.
What we would like to see is a bit more detail behind how it's going to work and to understand and see what is the housing plan, what are the targets for key areas around the country, what are the milestones so that we know we're on track and who is actually accountable for delivering this.
Phil Twyford has pledged 1,000 Kiwi Build homes by June next year. So far, 30 houses are expected by December. His critics will be counting each new home to make sure he meets his promises. For Checkpoint, Patrick O'Mara.
A Christchurch woman has posted an open letter on Facebook to EQC about her 5 years of anguish, heartbreak and financial struggles and her fears for the future after discovering the dream home she'd purchased in 2013 had botched repairs. Checkpoint's been following Georgina Hannafin's story since the EQC offered her $48,000 to fix the house, which now faces a repair bill of $260,000. Her mortgage is more than $300,000. In the open letter, Georgina tells EQC she's heartbroken and at breaking point about her future. She's also angry she's had to fight EQC to be reimbursed for independent engineers' reports. But in the past half hour, there's been a development and Georgie joins us now live. Hi, Georgie. What's happened this afternoon?
Hi. So this afternoon we did receive confirmation from EQC that after all the emails going backwards and forwards that they have agreed to actually reimburse me the structural engineer's report that they originally decided they weren't going to reimburse. So it's a win for me there. But they have also offered me a full and final settlement amount and I guess in their eyes they view the claim as being closed. And I have actually emailed them back and told them that I'm not accepting that as a full and final settlement.
So the full and so you're happy to have the engineers report reimbursed. That's some good news, but you're saying that full and final settlement's not enough.
Absolutely, yep. So I'm stoked. I'm over the moon that they have reimbursed the $7,000 that I was out of pocket after commissioning structural engineers reports. But the amount that they've actually come to as a settlement amount it's unacceptable, and it's not going to fix the damage that they've done to my house.
How far short is it of what you need, Georgie?
We are looking at about $200,000 short of what we need.
What does that mean for you now then?
We've joined up with Andrew Hooker's test case, so we are actually going to be taking it through the court system. And it's an ongoing battle. It's an ongoing thing, unfortunately for us.
And I guess on that note, you've written this letter, very emotional letter, on your Facebook page. What's prompted you to write that now?
Just last night, I sat down on the couch, and for the first time in 6 months, I just had time to myself, and it just I just started to cry and I just couldn't stop. And I think the most frustrating thing about all of this isn't the fact that we've got houses that need to be properly repaired. It's the fact that it's dehumanising having to deal with EQC on a daily basis. It's a full-time job. We're tired, we're exhausted, we're financially destitute. We are living with depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorders, other stress-related illnesses that are all caused by EQC. The older generation, they've lost the retirement years that they've worked so hard for, and it's not just about getting houses repaired. It's about real people and real families and real mental health issues and being treated than more than just a number. And the report that they brought out was awful for a lot of us.
Has EQC seen that letter, do you know?
I haven't forwarded it to them at EQC, but I don't doubt that at some point it will come across their desk. Whether or not it reaches the human side of the people that are inside, I don't know. But it was more for everybody else to understand that this is our lives, this is our livelihood, and it's our future, and it's our children's future. And just not just the financial toll that this has had on us, but the emotional toll. It's heartbreaking, and it's ongoing.
A big review out this week, saying that the EQC needs to show more empathy to the people it's dealing with. It needs to be more open and more transparent. What do you feel about the chances of it being able to change are?
I think it's absolutely ridiculous that they needed someone from the outside to come in and tell them that that's how that they should be treating people. We're not numbers. We're people whose lives have been put on hold while we fight for what's right. They should know, the people that are working inside this corporation should know that they need to treat us with empathy and understand a little bit about what we've lost or what we're fighting for. It's customer service 101, treating people with respect and humanity.
Georgie, what would a win look like for you?
Personally, a win for me would look like me getting EQC to acknowledge that their negligence and the shoddy workmanship that was carried out under their watch has resulted in the situation that I'm in today, both financially, emotionally, and with the house, and then paying the full amount to get that repaired. The bigger picture, though, I want to continue to be the voice for the people that don't have the voice. There's an entire community of us who hold each other up and remind each other that there's light at the end of the tunnel, and so the letter was for them as well, to let them know that they're not alone.
Oh, look, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. That's Georgie Hannafin there, who is a Christchurch earthquake complainant who's written an open letter about her frustrations at dealing with the EQC. Well, to Hawaii now, where lava from the Kilauea volcano has engulfed 2 entire seaside communities on Big Island. The dramatic eruptions over the past month have forced more than 20 fissures to open in the ground, sending lava fountaining into the skies. Reuters' Yahaira Jaquez reports.
Hundreds of homes devoured by lava from Hawaii's Kilauea volcano after rivers of molten rock reached 2 seaside communities. Kapoho Bay and Vacation Land, the 2 scenic communities where officials say nearly 280 homes once stood, wiped out, bringing the number of buildings destroyed by Kilauea to at least 400.
Lava has moved into Kapoho Bay, began to fill in. It's, I think, extended out about 0.7 of a mile.
While most of the volcano's vents have grown quiet over the past 2 weeks, Fissure 8 is still active, blasting lava as high as 260 feet. Residents evacuated from the oceanfront communities last week, just hours before lava cut off all escape routes.
Lights flashing, sirens on,
and saying everybody evacuate, the lava is going to be at Four Corners.
Most residents heeded the call, and so far no injuries have been reported. But the place they called home is now buried. As of Monday, lava had covered nearly 8 square miles on the Big Island, equal to about 3,900 football fields.
That report there from Reuters. Well, when the All Black brothers, Scott, Geordie and Beauden Barrett run on to Eden Park against France tomorrow, they'll not only be doing their nana proud, they'll also be filling her scrapbooks. Mary Barrett, who'll be travelling from New Plymouth to watch the game tomorrow night, has a scrapbook for each of her All Black grandsons, which she fills with newspaper clippings and photographs she takes from TV. I asked her earlier this afternoon when she found out her 3 grandsons had made history being named together in the starting 15.
Beauden gave me a lovely text on Tuesday evening saying that we 3 boys are starting. And that's how it started, this Tuesday evening.
You must have been very proud when you heard that.
We're very, very proud. I've always said to Beauden, when you 3 boys play, I don't care where you are, I'm going to go and see you play. And my husband and I are so delighted that they're playing in Auckland this week, so we can both go up and join with Kevin and Robin and the 3 boys and the rest of their family. We're so delighted for them.
Oh, fantastic. So you'll be in the stand. Will you be nervous?
Not really. No, as long as I've always said, win, lose or draw doesn't worry me, as long as there is no serious injury.
Yeah, because what do you think when you see the kind of bangs and scrapes and bumps that go on out there?
Oh, it's getting very hard and fast nowadays. It really, really is. But my enjoyment will be when those 3 boys stand together for the national anthem, and Nana will have tears rolling down her face.
And you would have been busy with the scrapbooking this week and coming up as well. Can you tell us a bit about that?
The scrapbooking I had started for years ago. I'm on to Beauden's 10th book now, and they're clear files. And Scotty's about 3, and I think Geordie's about 2. Geordie said the other day, Nana, are you still doing the scrapbooks? I said, yes, dear, I'm still doing them. So I get as much, and I've got some lovely neighbours that give me some of their clippings, because sometimes I need more than one. I need three pieces of cuttings, yes.
So do you gather them from newspapers, the local ones, or do you go sort of further afield?
Taranaki and also the Dominion. And whoever sees different things in the papers, they pass them on to me, which is very, very nice. So
on Sunday, you might need 3 copies of the Sunday Star Times.
I probably will.
With the boys, has it always sort of been a sibling rivalry? Like, has Geordie been saying to the other 2, hang on you 2, I'm coming for you?
They used to give him a little bit of, whatever when he was younger, and you tried to, as you probably read in the papers, he tries to keep up with the other boys, but the 3 lovely boys, and that's all I can say about them. And the whole family are a lovely family too,
Where are you sitting? Have you got good seats for Saturday?
I don't know.
Fingers crossed. What about a score? What's your pick?
I'm not going to pick anything. No. I'm going to see the 3 grandsons play, and hopefully there will be no injuries, and I hope everything goes well, but I'm also picking that the All Blacks will have a nice win over France.
And that is the Barrett brothers' very proud nana, Mary Barrett. Well, an improving French team will provide a challenge when the Barretts and the rest of the All Blacks play their first test of the year tomorrow night. While the world champion New Zealand side are favoured to prevail, France aren't expected to be pushovers, and there might be a bit of rust from the All Blacks as players from the 5 Super Rugby franchises join forces for the first time this year. Well, our sports reporter Clay Wilson joins me here in the studio ahead of tomorrow night's match. What can we expect from the All Blacks, Clay?
Yeah, as you mentioned there, probably a little bit of rust. Quite often in this first game of the season, we do see that from the All Blacks. But they should probably still be too good in this game. They have several prominent players obviously out with injury: Captain Kieran Reid, Sonny Bill Williams, Dane Coles, Brodie Retallick just this week, so the list goes on. But I guess they're trying to keep things simple. They haven't had much time to prepare. Steve Hansen actually said this week that if they hadn't had 2 mini camps, which were a little bit controversial, that it would have been an impossible task to beat this French team. All Blacks stand-in captain Sam Whitelock was actually asked earlier today about how they can play well given that lack of preparation time, and this is what he had to say.
Everyone's got to worry about themselves individually first, myself included. If we can do that, then I think the rest of it comes a lot easier rather than worrying about everything else. Keeping it simple, everyone's picked because they're good rugby players, so you need to just trust that natural instinct that's built up over many years.
So it's only test number 1 of a busy year for the All Blacks, but there's a wee bit riding on this one, isn't there?
Yeah, the All Blacks, as the best team in the world, of course, have many winning streaks to maintain. There's a couple on the line tomorrow night. The first one is their winning streak against France, which is 11 matches now. That dates back to 2009 when they lost to the French in Dunedin. But the big one really is their winning streak, which is now famous at Eden Park, which is out to 40 games now, would you believe it? Now, people with long memories and rugby fans will remember well that the last team to beat New Zealand at Eden Park was, of course, the French. That was way back in 1994. Now, some of the All Blacks squad, well, quite a few of them, in fact, were not even born when that game was played. So it just goes to show how long ago it was.
And what do we know about this French squad?
Well, we haven't actually heard much from the French this week. They've been a bit under the radar, and Steve Hansen says that he thinks that's a big sign that they're really up for this game. Like the All Blacks, they do have a few injury issues, and this isn't their strongest squad. They also had their big club final last weekend. But given all that, it's probably the strongest team they could have produced. Now, they finished 4th in this year's Six Nations, which was played in February and March, but they did show some promising signs, particularly with their defence. The All Blacks and Steve Hansen have been at pains this week to remind people that statistically this is the best defensive team in the world. They're under a new coaching regime, going in a new direction. So the All Blacks are certainly wary that if they don't turn up, they could be embarrassed, but I don't expect we're going to see that.
Thank you very much, Clay, and enjoy the game tomorrow night. That is our sports reporter, Clay Wilson there. Coming up here on Checkpoint, after 3 decades, Auckland's Western Springs Speedway makes way for cricket. More than 500 farmers turn up to a Mycoplasma bovis meeting in Morrinsville. NASA scientists say they might be a step closer to finding out if there's life on Mars. We'd love your feedback, we always do. Don't forget you can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Now here's Katrina Batten with the headlines.
A Christchurch woman has won a full reimbursement from EQC for engineers' reports over botched repairs to her house. Georgina Hannafin wrote an open letter to EQC on Facebook after 5 years of battling the organisation, detailing heartbreak and anger. She's told Checkpoint dealing with EQC is a full-time job. A judge says she hasn't experienced the level of emotion in court as a jury finds a son who fatally stabbed his father not guilty of murder. The man wept as the verdict was handed down in the High Court in Auckland. The court heard that the father subjected the family to years of violence. On the day he died, the father had beaten his wife. The Salvation Army says a new housing ministry's priority should ramp up efforts to house the homeless. The Ministry of Housing and Urban Development will incorporate units currently spread across 3 departments into one-stop policy shop on affordable housing, homelessness and large-scale housing developments. The Salvation Army's Alan Johnson says the government needs to get on with building state houses and other forms of social housing because that's where the greatest need is. Train services on Auckland's Western Line have been suspended until further notice. The police say a truck took out train lines at a level crossing in Mount Eden near the prison around 2 o'clock this afternoon. Auckland Transport says it will take several hours to fix the overhead lines. 2 rescue helicopters are on their way to the scene of a serious crash near Taihape. The police say a vehicle went off the road on Spooners Hill Road at about 10 to 4 this afternoon. 2 people have been critically injured, another 2 seriously. A husband and wife were among those caught drink driving at a police checkpoint in Paraparaumu last night. A 54-year-old man who was found to be over the limit called his wife to collect him. But as she drove through the checkpoint to pick him up, she registered an even higher reading than her husband. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Thanks, Katrina. And turning to business news now, Nona Peltier's here. Hi, Nona. We've got an Auckland-based medical supplies company, REM Systems. It's been sold to an Australian firm. What's the deal there?
Yeah, well, this is a company that's based out of Australia. We wouldn't even have heard about it, except that this company in Australia, Paragon Care, is a listed company, and they raised 70 million Australian dollars earlier this year, and they've been acquiring businesses quite aggressively in Australia, and they've looked at this particular company, which is Auckland based, as a spearhead into New Zealand. So they paid, $54.4 million for this company. It's been in business since the early 80s. It's a family-owned business, and I guess they sell sort of medical equipment and other kinds of supplies, like everything from high-definition cameras and, bandages and that type of thing. So interesting company. Now owned by an Australian firm, but the staff are being retained, and I guess the mix of shares means that the family-owned business is going to have a stake in the Australian company too.
Yeah, big change for them.
Yeah,
and the deadline's closed for submissions on the New Zealand Stock Exchange review of the listing rules. Now, what are they looking at there?
Well, it's not a surprise, I guess, to a lot of people who follow the NZX, is that we haven't had very many new companies listing there for a while, and some of the ones that have been fairly disappointing. So there's been a lot of concern that maybe things are just not quite right at the NZX. There's something that needs to change. So the board of the NZX decided they were going to review the listing rules, and they started that process last year. This is the second round of submissions now. So I guess they got more than 60 in the first round, and the idea is to make it simpler for companies to list. One of the things that has been difficult and confusing is that there's 3 different kinds of markets. There's one alternative market, there's the market for small companies, and then there's the main board. And the NZX has found a lot of support for getting rid of those other 2 markets, combining them all into one, and then finding ways to simplify the rules so that it costs companies less to list and hopefully encourage more to do so. And that's the plan there. So if they can get their the submissions all together, do the review, they're planning to draft the new rules by the end of the year and have them signed off not only by their board but the Financial Markets Authority. And then these new rules would come into effect early next year with a transition period to give companies a chance to get used to it over, say, at least 6 months.
And just sort of sticking loosely with the markets, they're always kind of keeping an eye on what happens around the G7 summit meeting that's happening. What in Quebec, isn't it?
It's Charlevoix, and it's near Quebec City. So it's a beautiful part of Canada, but it's a place that people like to protest, and you can expect it to be a fairly testy meeting, because already today the president of France actually said that the United States better not start a trade war with friends, but I think the horse might have been already bolted there, because it does seem that that is exactly what Donald Trump is planning to do. He's basically imposed tariffs on steel and aluminium at 25%. Those are basically fighting words, so to speak. And we've already started to see some tit-for-tat activity there. So I wouldn't say it's going to be a very pleasant meeting, and it could, in fact, end up being in the first time of the history of this group. Now, who's in the group of 7? There's a number of countries that are in the group. There's, of course, Canada, the United States, France, Germany, Italy, and did I say Japan? Oh, and Great Britain.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what comes up.
Well, I'll tell you what might not come up is a communique following the meeting, because normally the parties get together and will publish, a report from the meeting. It may be that only 6 of them come to the party on that one, because they're going to be talking about climate change and gender equity issues, that sort of thing. So yes, it's going to be, well, something to see. And the markets will be closely following it. They were very cautious today ahead of that meeting. Not just that, but a few other things have unsettled the markets. So never mind, though, the New Zealand market took its lead from the U.S. The Dow closed up 0.4%. So did our market. Yes.
And what about the currency?
Well, before I tell you that, I'll tell you what. We rose 3.5% this week to another record. So 300 points up. That's since Tuesday. 39-point rise today, 8,938 was the close. That's quite a significant rise. So it's fairly toppy at the moment. Anything could happen. The dollar is trading at 70.2 US cents, so it's been holding very steady there. 92.2 Australian and 52.3 pence. And that's all from me.
Thank you. That was a lot. Thank you very much. That's Nona Peltier with a bit of a roundup of the business there. And now we go to the United States, where the leader of a rogue police unit in the American city of Baltimore has been sentenced to 25 years in prison. The former police sergeant Wayne Earl Jenkins sobbed in court as he admitted robbing Baltimore citizens, planting drugs on innocent people and reselling seized heroin, cocaine and prescription painkillers. He'd led an elite task force until his arrest last year. With the details, here's the BBC's Andrew Plant.
Hey, Sarge! Hey, come downstairs right quick.
A drug bust in Baltimore. A small elite team of police officers breaking open a safe, thousands of dollars of drug money inside. But what's been captured on camera is far from the full story.
Nobody touches, you understand me right now. Nobody.
In fact, they'd already opened the safe and stolen bundles of cash before closing it up and putting on the whole performance. The Gun Trace Task Force was led by Sergeant Wayne Jenkins, a decorated former Marine, arrested last year and now convicted of corruption on a massive scale. Jenkins and his team would steal money, plant evidence and even resell drugs they'd taken from dealers.
These officers would drive their car, gun it toward a group of black males on the corner. Most of the people they stopped were black males. Then they would stop it and see who would run. Well, these officers are riding around in unmarked cars. So if you have an unmarked car coming at you, there are 300 plus murders, you're going to feel that, oh my goodness, it's probably someone's coming to shoot up the sidewalk.
Jenkins didn't just steal from criminals. Prosecutors showed evidence of him building up the tools needed to commit crimes of his own. The jury was shown axes, machetes and crowbars, as well as black masks found in his van. Jenkins has now been given 25 years in jail, alongside Evodio Hendricks, Daniel Hersel, Jemal Rayam, Maurice Ward, Marcus Taylor and Mamodu Gondu, all but one member of the Gun Trace Task Force convicted for racketeering, robbery and falsification of records. The unit's corruption has led to 1,700 criminal cases being thrown out, their evidence now impossible to trust. The damage to the police's public image, though, much more difficult to measure.
Andrew Plant reporting there. And staying in the United States, where President Donald Trump says he'll consider inviting the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to the White House if their historic summit next week goes well. He made the comment after a meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in Washington, where they discussed the upcoming summit in Singapore. Mr. Abe is hoping that if Mr. Trump strikes a deal with Kim Jong-un, Japan's security will be taken into account. The BBC's Jane O'Brien reports.
With the clock ticking down to Tuesday's summit with Kim Jong-un, Donald Trump was visibly excited.
I think it's going to be a very fruitful meeting. I think it's going to be an exciting meeting. I think we're going to get to know a lot of people that our country never got to know.
So the summit now seems to be more of a getting-to-know-you session rather than a complex and high-stakes negotiation. Another insight into Mr. Trump's rather unorthodox approach.
I don't think I have to prepare very much. It's about attitude. It's about willingness to get things done. But I think I've been preparing for this summit for a long time.
That's in contrast to the rather more direct approach taken by the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo when asked if both sides were closer to agreeing on a definition of denuclearization.
Yes.
Can you describe that a little bit?
No.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Japan.
But for Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe here in Washington to ensure his voice is heard, the direct threat from North Korea remains. These drills are a practice for the ballistic missiles that can already reach Tokyo, with or without nuclear warheads. But Mr. Abe seems to have been sidelined. Kim has met with China's President Xi, South Korea's President Moon, and Mr. Pompeo. Mr Trump, meanwhile, is already thinking of other photo ops with Mr Kim.
Sir, if you do invite him to the United States, would it be here at the White House or at Mar-a-Lago?
Maybe we'll start with the White House. What do you think?
Mr Abe has invested a lot of time building a personal relationship with Mr Trump, but as other leaders of US allies have discovered to their cost, friendship doesn't always come with benefits. And with Mr Trump so keen for his own success, Mr Abe might be right to worry.
That's Jane O'Brien reporting from Washington there. Well, as tons of forestry debris begins to be collected from the Tolaga Bay foreshore today, areas across the top of the South Island which suffered a similar damage 4 months ago are still dealing with the fallout. Cyclone Gita triggered an avalanche of trees, logs and debris that swept across Maraho in the Tasman district in February, and the clean-up's still continuing. The Marlborough District Council's recently successfully prosecuted a foreign-owned forestry company for damage caused to property there from a similar event in late 2016. But a Nelson-based forest management company says firms aren't operating any differently and blames more extreme weather events that are happening more frequently. Here's our Nelson reporter Tracy Neal with the story.
Far out. Oh, hell. Jesus.
That was a panic-stricken Motueka Valley resident racing to higher ground as a flash flood of huge logs swept down a once small stream near houses and sheds. More than 200 millimetres of rain fell in just a few hours onto hillsides, sending trees tumbling. Maraho resident Merv Hall said soon after he narrowly escaped the deluge of logs in the February storm, it was a miracle no one was killed.
When the tidal waves came through, the log jams would release and we get these waves of water that would have been 6-7 metres high, 8 metres high.
Almost 4,000 claims from Cyclone Gita cost insurers just over $28 million. 2/3 of those claims were for homes and contents, mainly across the top of the South Island. Tasman Forest Management, which is in charge of the forests above Maraho, diverted heavy machinery from forest work and put in additional resources to help clean up 10 affected properties. Managing Director Craig McMicken says they're still tidying up.
We've been continuing to work on the storm damage within the forest and on some of the neighbouring land where people have been affected.
Craig McMicken says similar events in Marlborough in late 2016 and now in Gisborne are neither coincidence nor related to changes in land use. Instead, it's due to more frequent bouts of extreme weather, which he says the forestry industry can't ignore.
I think we've definitely got to continue to look at how we can improve what we're doing, and as an industry we are.
Tasman Forest Management is reviewing what areas of Maraho it might pull back from. New national rules for plantation forestry will give councils the ability to impose stricter rules in unique and sensitive environments. Tasman Mayor Richard Kempthorne says recent weather events will add another layer to future decision-making, but it's more likely to mean changes to the way micro pockets of land are managed.
Rather than looking at sort of widespread areas, are there specific subsections of a catchment where something different needs to happen? I think that's more to the point.
And councils are getting tough. A storm in late 2016 brought heavy rain which pushed forestry debris towards a house in Marlborough from which a family with young children was airlifted to safety. Last month, the New Zealand management arm of US-owned forestry management company Merrill & Ring was ordered to pay nearly $60,000 in fines and reparations after admitting the charges laid under the Resource Management Act. The Marlborough District Council's compliance manager, Gina Ferguson, says she believes it's the most significant case brought by the council aimed at deterring similar events.
One of the contributing factors to the culpability of the management company here was the fact that council had actually advised them 6 months prior to remove the wood and debris from the waterway. That advice and action wasn't taken.
The council says the new standards have identified almost all forestry areas in Marlborough to be at increased risk from erosion, and in response it's taking a tougher line. In Nelson for Checkpoint, Tracy Neal.
It's going to be a long trip home for many Auckland commuters tonight after trains on the Western Line were cancelled this afternoon after a truck crashed into power lines. Train services on the Western Line from Newmarket to Swanson, that's a big stretch of line, have been suspended until further notice. Our reporter Sarah Robson is at the Britomart train station in downtown Auckland and joins us now. Hi Sarah, how are people getting home tonight if the trains aren't running?
Hi Rowan, I've spoken to a few frustrated usual train takers down here at Britomart Station tonight. There are people who live quite far out west beyond Swanson who usually catch the direct train from Britomart straight out there, and they are having to find alternative ways of getting home. So that involves either catching the train to Newmarket and getting on one of the limited rail replacement buses, or catching a bus from the inner city. But some people are pretty frustrated that they're going to have to take multiple buses home, and that could add a good chunk of time to their usual commute. I spoke to a couple of guys here whose cars are parked at Fruitvale Station out west, and they actually ended up getting a $45 Uber from the city centre out there.
Gosh, so not a good way to go into the weekend for some of those people. Any idea when the trains will be back up and running?
Spoke to Auckland Transport a bit earlier on this afternoon. Kiwi Rail is actually responsible for fixing these overhead lines that were taken out by this truck this afternoon. There will be people working into the night to try and get those overhead lines back up and going so the trains can get back on track as soon as possible. Obviously, there is the All Blacks versus France test at Eden Park tomorrow evening, and the trains are one of the big ways to get to the stadium, so they'll be hoping that the train services are back up and running as soon as possible before then.
Absolutely. Thanks very much. Sarah Robson talking to us there from the Britomart station about some big train suspensions in Auckland. Well, NASA scientists say they might be a step closer to finding out if there's life on Mars. They've announced that the Mars Curiosity rover discovered organic molecules on the red planet when it dug just 5 centimetres down into an ancient lake bed. They also found seasonal fluctuations in methane gas, which is often associated with organic material and life. The ABC's George Roberts has more.
It's such a big question, even David Bowie pondered it. Is there life on Mars? Now NASA's a step closer to finding out if there is or was life on the red planet. Chris Webster is a NASA jet propulsion researcher.
So today we're announcing a discovery of a repeatable, identifiable seasonal pattern in the methane measurements.
The space agency's Curiosity project team discovered the methane on Mars fluctuates with the planet's seasons.
And we see this low background level. You can see from the winter to the summer this growth. And the big surprise too is not only have we got this wonderful repeatability, but the seasonal cycle changes by a factor of 3. That's a huge change.
Dr. Ashwin Vasavada is also with the Curiosity project.
And this is not only important for Curiosity as, fulfilling one of our main mission objectives, but it's also important for future Mars missions who will seek direct signs of life.
But hang on, methane? Isn't that the gas from cow dungs and compost heaps?
That's right. That's what people think when they hear methane.
Dr. Brad Tucker is an astrophysicist from the Australian National University.
And that's why it becomes quite excited for what we're talking about on Mars, is that things give off methane. Now, we don't know that this is the thing that gave it off, but it's a good sign. And it's also season variable. So it's not just the winter, it's not just the summer, it's stronger. And so it's coming from underneath the crust. So it's something quite interesting that gets people excited.
Is it definitely a sign of life?
I think it's a good sign that there could be life. And that's the hard thing, is you have to find that thing that produces it. But, originally a theory when there was some methane detected was, it could be rocks giving off. But this is clearly coming beneath the surface of Mars, which encourages some of these further explorations of underneath the surface.
The smelly gas isn't the only reason people like Brad Tucker are excited.
So they also found organic carbon, and this is what we use to create humans and cells and bodies and life forms. And because it survived for over 3 billion years, from going from when Mars we believe was habitable to not, it gives us a possibility that something still literally could be surviving there on Mars right now.
And that is Dr. Brad Tucker ending that report about whether there's life on Mars from George Roberts. Well, a big weekend up ahead for Coronation Street fans, and they have been warned they might need to sit down with a stiff drink on Sunday night when TVNZ presses the fast forward button on Britain's longest running soap, also pretty popular here. New Zealand viewers are currently 18 months behind the UK, so TVNZ's giving viewers two options. They can either catch up by watching a 2-hour special on Sunday night, or they can keep watching the current series at their own pace on weekday afternoons. Well, TVNZ's head of programming's John Kelly, and I spoke to him earlier and asked him what the viewers can expect.
It made me laugh, it made me cry. There were bits in it where I thought, oh my God, this is Coronation Street, it's wonderful. There is one moment, do you mind if I give a spoiler?
Not at all. I don't anyway.
Right. Well, let's just say there's a moment where David Platt, Gail's son, something horrific happens to him, and I think the acting is incredible. My God, it actually brought tears to my eyes. I think viewers are going to be in for a treat. Hopefully what I want them to take out of it is there is an amazing amount of stuff that we are not cramming, but putting into this 2-hour special that will make them excited about what's happening in Coronation Street now.
I mean, everything you've described there sort of sounds like situation normal on the street. It's just it's all, as you said, crammed in to 2 hours. Yep. It must be a pretty intense watch.
It is an intense watch, and as I said before, it'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry. But we very early on, once we had this idea, even before we'd kind of formulated what we were doing, I was very fortunate enough to meet the producer of Coronation Street in Cairn, and we had a great meeting, and she was like, oh, I think it'd be wonderful if you could come on board and be up to date with us. And so we talked with a few more ITV people about the idea of jumping ahead, and they were really excited. And actually, they said, well, we will produce a special for you. We'll make it especially for New Zealand and help to get viewers up to speed.
Have you had to employ any, or have they had to employ any tricks like voiceovers, or is it all just sort of flowing together as one movie-length event?
Well, we've got Nick Tilsley, the actor who plays Nick Tilsley. He is hosting the show, and he also, he'll fill in details where you need to know. And they've done it in a really compelling way. Sometimes he'll be there talking to us, but there's a great moment with him with cutout heads onto a whiteboard, which really cute. And so if you're watching it and you think, oh, is it going to all be like this? No, they do different tricks to get you up to date with different storylines. And what I really love about it, they let it breathe. When there are really intense moments, and it was something we'd talked to them about right at the beginning, that let it play out. We don't want something that's really fast and people feel that they're missing out on something. So, I talked about the David Platt storyline. It honestly, it plays out, and you're given the time to get involved into it.
So, for those who are settling down to watch the episode on Sunday, is it a stiff drink or a nice cup of tea that you need with you?
I think, for me it would be a stiff drink because I'll be as nervous as hell. But I think for the viewers, I think sit down with a cup of tea, and if you've never watched Coronation Street before, or you think you know Coronation Street, actually sit down and watch it, because I think this show may get you either watching it again, or it may just become, if you've never seen it before, it may change your perception, and it might just be your new TV addiction.
And that's TVNZ's head of programming, John Kelly, talking about that change there to Coronation Street, fast forwarding by 18 months in just 2 hours. And always interesting to see what happens with those Coronation Street things, because there are some very loyal fans there. And you are with Checkpoint. I'm Rowan Quinn, standing in for John Campbell tonight. Coming up after 6, there's long been controversy over the sports location in Western Springs, about Speedway that is, with some vocal neighbours complaining about the noise. But after 3 decades, the Speedway moves out to make way for cricket, much more genteel. More than 500 farmers turn up to a Mycoplasma bovis meeting in Morrinsville. The search for survivors from the deadly eruption of Guatemala's Fuego volcano has been temporarily suspended as conditions for rescue workers become too dangerous. New official figures show gangs are once again attracting new members. And in a very different change of tack there, an update on the miracle kitty who survived 4.5 hours hanging from the grille of a car from Auckland to New Plymouth. Don't forget, we love to get your feedback. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us, Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz and catch up with anything you'd like online at rnz.co.nz. Here's Katrina with the news.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening, I'm Katrina Battam. The Auckland man accused of murdering his father wept as not guilty verdicts were handed down in the High Court this afternoon. He then had to leave court after hugging his partner and child. Edward Gay was in court.
Justice Duffy told the jurors she had not experienced the level of emotion that had been on display in this trial. The court heard that the father subjected the family to years of violence. On the day he died, the father had beaten his wife. Later that night, he was locked out of the house, kicking at the door and trying to put his hand in the windows. The family believed he had left the property, and the son went to investigate, taking a knife. But a scuffle broke out during which the father was fatally stabbed. The son's lawyers argued he had acted in self-defence. I Tamaki Makoto ko Edward Gay aho.
Some commuters in Auckland are finding another way home tonight after a truck took out overhead train lines. Train services on the Western Line from Newmarket to Swanson have been suspended until further notice. The police say a truck took out train lines at a level crossing in Mount Eden near the prison around 2 o'clock this afternoon. Auckland Transport says the overhead lines are being repaired, but they'll take several hours to fix. People who usually take the train to the west are being told to make alternative plans to get home. There are some limited replacement buses. A Christchurch woman who discovered the dream home she had purchased in 2013 had botched earthquake repairs says she's finally had a win with EQC. Georgina Hannafin posted an open letter on Facebook about her 5 years of anguish, heartbreak and financial struggles and her fears for the future. EQC offered her $48,000 to fix the house, which now faces a repair bill of $260,000. Her mortgage is more than $300,000. She told Checkpoint that just this afternoon EQC agreed to reimburse her for some expenses.
We did receive confirmation from EQC that after all the emails going backwards and forwards that they have agreed to actually reimburse me the structural engineer's report. So it's a win for me there. But they have also offered me a full and final settlement amount.
But Georgina Hannafin says she emailed EQC saying she does not accept their full and final offer because it will not cover fixing the damage to her house. She says it's about $200,000 short. 2 rescue helicopters have gone to the scene of a serious crash near Taihape. The police say a vehicle went off the road on Spooners Hill Road at about 10 to 4 this afternoon. 2 people have been critically injured, another 2 seriously. They'll be airlifted to hospital. A husband and wife were among those caught drink driving by police at a checkpoint in Paraparaumu last night. A 54-year-old man who was found to be over the limit called his wife to collect him. But as she drove through the checkpoint to pick him up, she registered an even higher reading than her husband. The Wellington Road Policing Manager, Inspector Jan Craig, says it's beyond belief someone could turn up to an alcohol checkpoint to pick up another drunk driver when they'd been drinking themselves. She says it's alarming there are still drivers who are willing to risk harming others by drink driving. The checkpoint was in place for an hour and a half and resulted in 6 drivers being charged, including one who was driving while disqualified. The search for survivors from the deadly eruption of Guatemala's Fuego volcano has been temporarily suspended because conditions for rescue workers have become too dangerous. The volcano erupted on Monday, sending tons of ash and debris cascading down the mountain, engulfing villages below. The death toll stands at 109, but up to 200 people are missing. Elizabeth Boccoletti from the aid agency Save the Children says survivors are in desperate need of shelter and psychological support.
The stories that we are hearing here are very heartbreaking and very sad to see women looking for their daughter and son and their children who also have been lost their parents, and they are suffering a lot. There's a lot of suffering around here.
Elizabeth Boccoletti. Emergency authorities say rescue efforts will resume if conditions on the ground improve. The Marlborough District Council says it's imposing tougher rules on forestry companies. The region is just one of those affected recently by forest slash slipping off hills and onto property. The Marlborough Council's compliance manager says mapping done for the new national standards show almost all forestry areas in Marlborough are at increased risk from erosion. Gina Ferguson says in response the council is taking a tougher line than required under the rules.
So down in the Sounds at the moment, under our plan, it's required to have a discretionary resource consent for forestry harvesting, and we have imposed more stringent rules.
Marlborough Council Manager Gina Ferguson. The Marlborough District Council has recently successfully prosecuted a foreign-owned forestry company for damage caused to private property by debris caused during a storm in 2016. It's 6:05. Sport. The New Zealand cycling chair, Tony Mitchell, says Chief Executive Andrew Matheson took leave citing health issues after concerns were raised over the failure to deal with allegations of misconduct surrounding sprint coach Anthony Peden. Peden resigned last week after reports linked him to bullying, an inappropriate relationship with an athlete and drinking issues, which Matheson was apparently aware of. Mitchell says Matheson's health issues are unknown and he's yet to speak with him.
Andrew has the support of the board, and we do hope that Andrew returns soon. We do have some questions for Andrew, but all of the partners that I have phoned, all of the sponsors that I have phoned to talk to them about the current situation have been very supportive of Andrew. Andrew's health reasons, I haven't had them clarified to me, but at this stage he's on leave until he's well enough to come back.
Tony Mitchell. The All Blacks stand-in captain Sam Whitelock feels ready to return to the field for tomorrow night's test against France in Auckland. Crusaders second rower Whitelock missed his team's last 3 Super Rugby matches with concussion, but is cleared to start the All Blacks' first test of the 2018 season at Eden Park. Whitelock says a bit of fatigue is his only concern.
It's frustrating for myself. I always want to be out there if I'm 100% fit or even if I'm not. So really excited about getting out there this weekend. Been lucky enough to be in this environment a couple of times, so just need to back myself and my own ability to get out there. At times I'm going to be blowing hard, but I think that's normal no matter where you are in a test match.
Sam Whitelock. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, Angie Meikle-John's experience as a Centrepoint community concubine. Stephen Nicholl says Antarctic krill are among the world's most astonishing animals. And Clark Gayford on, fishing. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 o'clock here on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight. Tomorrow, Northland to Whanganui and Taihape, also Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Mostly fine, the odd shower about eastern Northland tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, showers easing today and clearing Hawke's Bay later, fine tomorrow. Manawatu and Kapiti, fine today, partly cloudy tomorrow with isolated showers. Wellington and Wairarapa, cloud and showers gradually clearing today, then mainly fine. Brief showers about Wellington tomorrow morning. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and North Otago, generally fine but increasing high cloud tomorrow. For the remainder of Otago and Southland, fine today apart from inland valley fog or low cloud. High cloud tomorrow and scattered rain spreading north from afternoon. Bulla and Westland, fine at first but cloud increasing this evening. Scattered showers tomorrow and rain with heavy falls developing in Westland from afternoon. Fiordland, showers developing this evening. Rain with heavy falls tomorrow, easing from evening. The Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with a few showers today. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you, Katrina. And I am Rowan Quinn, in tonight for John Campbell. Well, Western Springs in Auckland looks set to swap petrol and rubber for the cricket bat and ball as the Speedway announces it's moving on. There's long been controversy over the sport's current location in Western Springs, with some vocal neighbours complaining about the noise. After long fighting any move to move away, the Speedway's now agreed it's time to go. Tom Verley reports.
It's a roar thousands of spectators, competitors and neighbourhoods kilometres away know well. Graham Sandring has been competing at Western Springs for more than 30 years, including taking out 2 of his 4 national titles there. But after almost 90 years of racing, the sport's central Auckland home is set to move.
I've been there virtually all my life. My mother sold tickets on the gate when I was very, very young, and then I was obviously going there as a spectator to watch many, many years, and then took up racing there in the 1983-84 season. So I'd raced right up until probably 3 years ago. So I've got a life of Western Springs and a life of Speedway.
A standoff between Regional Facilities Auckland and Speedway over the future of the site has raged for years. However, today both sides, along with Auckland Council, signed a memorandum of understanding that they'll move to Collindale Motorsport Park in Wiri, near Auckland Airport. The Speedway's director, Bill Buckley, says the sport has outgrown the Speedway, which because of noise constraints can only race 12 nights a year and only until 10 p.m.
It'll be sadly missed when we move out of the Springs. I'll probably feel it more than a lot of the people that are protesting about not being there. But I just think that we have to look at the future. The Springs would need almost as much redevelopment to try and keep us there. And then we'd still have problems with getting more than 12 meetings a year.
The Speedway says the new facility will be world-class, but won't be cheap. Mr Buckley says while it's early days, he expects it'll cost more than $20 million. The city's mayor, Phil Goff, says the decision is a win for Speedway's long-term future and a win for other possibilities for the space. The body overseeing and reviewing the region's facilities has earmarked Western Springs as a possible international cricket ground. Phil Goff says there is no budget set aside for that yet.
The world has been deciding that you can't have a rectangular stadium for rugby, for league and for soccer, and an oval stadium for cricket and get the best of both worlds. Sometimes you get the worst of each. So at a certain point, with the redevelopment of a new stadium, whether it be on Eden Park or in the city centre, a new stadium would be solely rectangular, and that means that at that point there would need to be a move by cricket.
Over the years, many locals have complained about the noise the Speedway creates, and that's led to more and more restrictions. However, nearby residents spoken to by RNZ say they're used to it, and it'll be a loss for the community. Nigel Gray's property overlooks the Speedway. He says when the cars are racing, he can still happily watch a movie in his lounge without having to turn the volume up. He says, if anything, the concerts and other big events have a greater effect on the community, and he's sad to see the Speedway go.
I'd have Speedway every day over cricket. I'm not against cricket. I've just seen, and we all have seen, the impact of cricket at Eden Park and the residents with road closures, parking restrictions, the volume of people, the noise. Look, you know, we're just going to move one problem to another area. We're going to take the issues we have at Eden Park, where there's insufficient infrastructure, to another area where it can't cope.
From here, the Auckland Council, Regional Facilities and Speedway Promotions continue to work on the move, including discussing funding. It's hoped Speedway will begin at Collindale Park in 2020. This is Tom Furley.
About 500 farmers and industry representatives met in Morrinsville this morning as authorities ramp up their Mycoplasma bovis response. The meeting was the first in a series around the country hosted by the Ministry for Primary Industries since the decision by the government to try to eradicate the disease. There are currently 36 properties infected around the country, with another 71 under restricted notices. One of the infected properties is in Waikato. Here's our Waikato reporter, Andrew McRae.
Today's meeting is one of a series around the country hosted by the Ministry since the decision by the government on Monday last week to try to eradicate the disease at a cost of nearly $890 million. MPI has 300 people working on the outbreak. Its Director of Readiness and Response, Jeff Gwynn, believes the more than 70 meetings MPI held prior to the eradication plan being announced have been worthwhile, as farmers are now coming with a much better knowledge of the disease.
Because it shows that they understand the risk to themselves. They also understand that we can't do this unless we do it collectively, and they're beginning to see that their role in managing biosecurity on their own farm is actually a critical success factor.
MPI says 15 of the properties with infected cattle are dairy farms, 5 dairy drive stock operations, 14 beef farms and 2 are lifestyle blocks. Ian Storr is a dairy farmer at Tahoe. He says he's more confident now that everything necessary is being done than he was before the meeting.
I certainly am full supportive of the eradication process. It's not something we want to be living with long term.
Brian Foster has farmed near Morrinsville for 30 years and blames the country's slack biosecurity for letting M. bovis in.
From what I take from today's meeting is they're quite happy to continue to fund the eradication of this. So whether it should be in the budget or not, I think they've got the objective that they're going to continue to spend to help eradicate it.
Cam Heron's a share milker at Springdale. He hasn't been too worried about Mycoplasma bovis, but after attending the meeting, now has a better understanding of the potential risks.
Animal to animal contact is the main source of risk, so that's really where we need to focus on traceability around stock that are grazing off farm, that sort of thing, rather than, in my situation, rather than the in-house job at home. It's more when cattle are off farm. You don't know what other cattle your cattle have been exposed with.
Saga Ariel, who's originally from Nepal, manages a dairy farm near Waitoa. He says the way he farms has certainly changed since Mycoplasma bovis was first discovered last year.
Someone coming to our farm, we ask them to disinfect their, the boors and clothes,
The Minister of Agriculture and Biosecurity, Damien O'Connor, made an appearance at the meeting. He says the MPI-led response is making good progress, and the more information farmers can get, the better.
I think people hopefully will go away understanding that eradication is still by far the best objective, and we're committed to that. Questions were asked, most of them were answered as best that we could, and that people are going away knowing that they'll have to find out more as we learn more, and that help one another, which is another important thing.
Just over 24,000 cattle have so far been culled out of an estimated 152,000 cows likely to be destroyed over the next 2 years. The M. bovis Roadshow moved on to Te Awamutu this afternoon and is heading to Pukekohe on Monday. It will then extend out around the country. In Morrinsville for Checkpoint, Ko Andrew McRae-Tene.
The search for survivors from the deadly eruption of Guatemala's Fuego volcano has been temporarily suspended as conditions for rescue workers become too dangerous. The volcano erupted on Monday, sending tons of ash and debris cascading down the mountain, engulfing villages below. The death toll now stands at 109, but it's expected to rise with up to 200 people still missing. The ABC's Angus Randall has this report.
Locals are still digging through ash and mud left by Sunday's eruption. Oscar Chavez believes his family may be buried somewhere under his feet.
From the day all of this started, we effectively could not get in touch with them. We searched for them in shelters, hospitals, everywhere, but we did not find them. So we decided it was better to come here, and because authorities were not allowing entrance, we came from the mountains over there to come here to the house to see if we could find them.
Official recovery efforts have been halted due to heavy rain and ongoing volcanic activity, leaving those who remain in the area to use machetes, hoes and wheelbarrows to clear the rubble. It's dangerous work. The volcanic material is still smouldering. In the nearby city of Escuintla, families are holding funerals for their loved ones.
He said that all of a sudden he saw the lava and he could no longer get out. He said he was all burnt, but he was still alive when they got him out.
There's been some comfort from the tragedy. 6 Guatemalan children have been airlifted to Texas for treatment. Dr. Stephen Wolfe is from the Shriners Hospital for Children.
A minor burn is 1-2%. A moderate burn would be up to 10-15% of their body, and a massive burn or a severe burn would be above that. All of those kids have that final condition, the severe burns.
The death toll has been lifted to 109, with 200 more missing, but aid agencies believe the dead could number in the thousands. Ana Maria Mendez is the country director for Oxfam in Guatemala.
For us, the population is much more. We don't know if people have not evacuated, which is very dangerous, or if they have evacuated into private shelters or other homes or other communities.
And many people may never get a chance to identify their missing family members.
The few bodies that have been found are mostly unrecognizable or completely melted.
While opposition politicians are calling for the head of the emergency response to be sacked, Ana Maria Mendez says those who've lost everything just want their livelihood back.
There's a huge amount of fear, knowing that the event has not stopped, and also recognizing that the amount of damage that has been caused and the magnitude of this tragedy has been very hard on people.
As Ana Maria Mendez from Oxfam ending Angus Randall's report there. And meanwhile, further east, it's been confirmed that lava flows from Hawaii's erupting Kilauea volcano have now destroyed up to 600 homes since the latest eruption began on May the 3rd. Well, tensions between the US President Donald Trump and other world leaders over trade have escalated ahead of tomorrow's G7 summit in Canada. In a series of tweets, Mr. Trump criticised Canada and the EU and France for charging what he called massive tariffs. The French President Emmanuel Macron has hit back, saying the G7 could go on without the US if need be. Some are now calling the meeting the G6+1. The BBC's James Robbins has this report.
A chateau hotel in rural Quebec, the most peaceful of settings for some of the world's most powerful leaders to meet. But this G7 summit could get noisy. Donald Trump will be isolated as traditional American allies denounce his trade measures aimed directly at them. The president says he imposed tariffs on imported metals to protect American jobs and national security.
The American steel and aluminum industry has been ravaged by aggressive foreign trade practices. It's really an assault on our country.
Leaders heading for the summit are angry. President Macron of France urged politeness but reminded Donald Trump sharply no leader is forever. And Canada's Prime Minister, the host, openly derides Donald Trump's reasoning.
It is laughable to say that Canada, France can represent a threat to America's national security, as we are in reality the best allies the United States has had for a long time.
But a Canadian academic who's made studying the G7 part of his life's work urges caution. John Curtin told me all was not lost in this very public fight.
The Prime Minister, I don't think, has quite crossed the line where he said, Donald, you're irrational. He simply said your argument is irrational.
Left, right, left.
Canada is looking for solid European support in this fight, welcoming Theresa May, who made clear again on the flight here that the American tariffs were unjustified. The Prime Minister added the UK would continue to be a great champion for free trade around the world. Everything is now in place, including the parody puppets who pop up at every G7. The real leaders will soon lock horns with Donald Trump over who is the true threat to jobs and to growth. The risk of prolonged trade conflict hangs heavy over this summit.
James Robbins reporting there. Well, new official figures show gangs are once again attracting new members, and the government's preparing to counter any criminal activity by adding 700 new police staff to the organised crime squad. There were 5,785 identified members and prospects in April, an increase of nearly 1,500 on 2 years ago, with much of the growth coming from the East Coast and Hawke's Bay. As part of an investigation into where gangs are heading in New Zealand, RNZ's Insight program has what's thought to be the first media recording of a mongrel mob patching ceremony. The event was held in Hastings and involved members being welcomed into a new Fatherland chapter. Philippa Tolley has more.
Dozens of mongrel mob members gathered to witness the patching of a handful of men into the new chapter. Among them was Tamiana, who'd finished his time as a prospect.
It's not an easy road, but yeah, I pulled through. Today's the day. Follow my dad, who passed away, Morris Cook dog. Hitched up with the Hastings. Yep, follow my old man's steps.
The recordings were made by gang expert and Canterbury University sociologist Jared Gilbert, who described the event as an occasion comparable to a 21st or wedding in the non-gang world. He says the whole patching ceremony has been smartened up.
It's cleaned up a lot in those days, and you can see that just in the dress of people. The ridgies, or the original clothing that used to sort of rot on a member, and in fact the older and the more ripped they looked, the cooler they sort of were. Nowadays it's far more clean cut.
After being greeted by the President, putting on his patch and drinking from a motorcycle boot filled with beer and gin, Tamiana is in. He's brought his dad's ashes to the patching and has only one response when asked how he feels.
Proud. Make me feel proud. Sick. Oh, he'll be about time, boy. He'll be happy if that was his wishes. Me keep my bulldog on my back. I love the Mongo mob. Family comes first, though, but Mongo mob, it's my family.
Nationally, the multi-agency Gang Intelligence Centre says gangs are involved throughout the drug trade and have become increasingly profit-driven. But in this chapter, the leaders say they reject both family violence and methamphetamine. Leon is the head of the South Island Fatherland chapter.
Yeah, we can't be with this shit. Yeah, I can't, especially younger members, older members. Yeah, we've got no time for it. We've had enough of a party. Yeah, so let's get on with things and this shit. It doesn't do anything good for you.
But the Police Minister, Stuart Nash, seems unconvinced there's any real desire in the country's biggest gang to change, even in part.
I mean, I think if I said I want to eliminate all gangs, that's just unrealistic. What we really do want to do is go incredibly hard against the gang leaders who are responsible for these meth rings or drug rings or causing.
So there are no
serious
leaders you can work with at any level?
Look, I haven't. No one's approached me to say, hey, we do have an issue, we know there's an issue, and I want to work very closely with police and other social services as well. And I am aware of a life member of Black Power who's working very hard in this area, but we need to see evidence of this.
The Minister says the extra 700 police staff going into the organised crime squad represents a massive increase in resource that will target illegal gang activities and will include going after their assets and their cash. For Checkpoint, Philippa Tolley.
And you can hear more about gangs in New Zealand on Insight this Sunday morning just after the 8 o'clock news, or you can podcast or read more from the Insight page on the RNZ website. Finally tonight, the North Taranaki SPCA says it's no closer to identifying the owners of a moggy who spent 4.5 hours clinging to the grille of a car. The cat, who's not microchipped, has made a miracle recovery after becoming hypothermic and losing some claws as he hung on for dear life on the 360-kilometre journey from Orewa to New Plymouth. The driver of the car parked it in a motel on Tuesday, not knowing the cat was inside. Passers-by later heard noises and called the SPCA. North Taranaki SPCA spokesperson Jackie Pole-Smith told me they've had no leads.
None. Not one.
It's quite unusual because he's gone everywhere. I think he's gone around the world a little bit.
I know. I mean, this unfortunately happens at SPCAs. We get in some absolutely beautiful cats that have obviously been pets and the owners never come forward and claim them. It's a big problem because of them not being microchipped, but also sometimes people just don't put the effort in. But this is different because it has been so widely publicised. We're quite astounded that nobody has come forward to say they recognise the cat.
What makes you so sure that he's a pet?
He's so friendly, very, very friendly, not at all timid, and so confident in a completely different situation.
What happens to him if no one claims him?
After 7 days, he legally becomes owned by the SPCA, and then we're able to put him up for adoption. Or perhaps if we say rehome him, because if I say put him up for adoption, we're going to get a zillion phone calls.
Have you had any phone calls yet?
We've had lots of contact from people offering him a home.
In Taranaki or where he was from originally up in Auckland?
New Zealand-wide.
What can you tell us? Can you tell us a bit more about him that could trigger someone's memory?
Well, really his distinctive colouring should be enough, because he's quite an interesting coloured cat with the white and the distinctive grey patches. But otherwise he's a lovely, friendly cat. And any idea of his age? No, I mean he's a young adult, but no, it's very hard, that space in between sort of 2 to 5 or 6. It's hard to determine.
And that was the North Taranaki SPCA spokesperson Jackie Pole-Smith, and they tell me they're calling the cat the Miracle Cat in lieu of any other nickname. And that is Checkpoint for this evening and this week. Thanks for joining us on your radio, your TV, online, or however you chose to connect with us today. You can catch up on our stories tonight on rnz.co.nz/checkpoint or our Facebook page. And for all the latest news, information, feature stories from New Zealand and around the world, go to the rnz.co.nz homepage. So whether you're watching the Barrett brothers make history at Eden Park, the Coronation Street catch-up, or whatever you're doing this weekend, have a lovely one. From me, Rowan Quinn, and the Checkpoint team, have a great weekend.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. A son was overcome with emotion and had to leave the court after hearing he'd been found not guilty of murdering his father. Frustrations abound among Auckland train commuters as repairs to overhead wires put trains on the Western Line out of action. A Christchurch woman who's had a small win with EQC over botched repairs to her house says she does not accept the agency's final offer. 2 people have been critically injured, another 2 seriously, when a car went off Spooners Hill Road near Taihape this afternoon. And conditions for rescue workers searching for survivors of Guatemala's Fuego volcano are too dangerous for them to continue. Our next news and weather is at 7.
After years of stagnation, gang membership appears to be on the rise.
They've actually had a real resurgence, and many of the groups now are in quite rude health.
And so too is involvement in the drugs trade.
Things are definitely changing. It's very much profit driven.
But some gang leaders are saying no.
I love my brothers, but I hate pee.
I'm Philippa Tolley, and this week Insight explores the state of gangs in New Zealand, just after the 8 o'clock news on Sunday morning with Wallace Chapman on RNZ National.
This is Trending Now, our feature highlighting the stories you've been sharing via digital and social media. Focus on Politics is here.